All right, well, good morning. I'm glad to see you guys. All right, we got two people glad to see me. Thank you. Appreciate that, right? It's been a while. Had a month off just to rest and relax, and it's been a good month. But certainly ready to get back to it. We got a lot of exciting things going on, upcoming things coming here at our church. You heard about We Are Here Week, starting September 15th. That's always a big week here, so make sure you sign up for that online. But we're starting a brand new series today, and we're gonna give Maya a pass this morning. The series is called Ekklesia, not Ekklesia. She was just following the directions of her fearless leader, our student pastor Joel. So we're gonna blame him today. Hey, when the wheels fall off of anything around here, we just blame Joel. He's an easy scapegoat. But by the end of this series, a few weeks from now, you will certainly know how not only to pronounce that term, but also what it means, what it's all about. And we'll get into that here in just a few minutes. But ever so often, you might find, especially this time of year, elections are coming up here in just a couple months, but politicians, scientists, maybe climate activists, or even religious groups and other religious leaders, they seem to attempt, not just during this time of the season, like voting, election season, but at any time, to get people all whipped up and in a frenzy about the end of the world. The world is coming to an end. The world as we know it, is collapsing. Now listen, I certainly believe that the world in which we live is coming to an end. I just don't know when. It may be imminent, maybe today, tomorrow, it may be 100 years from now. I just don't know. But we tend to sort of get ourselves worked up in a frenzy over that particular thought, right? I mean, how many of you just think back to, really wasn't that long ago in our minds, but it was now almost a quarter of a century ago. A quarter of a century. When the whole world thought, this is it. This is the end. And we all waited anxiously on the night of December 31st, 1999. What's going to happen, in the new millennium, the year 2000? Well, a lot's happened and a lot's changed since the year 2000, that's for sure. But here we are. Almost 25 years later, we're still here. But I mean, think back to those days. How much in our lives and in our world has changed since the year 2000? I mean, back then, cell phones, if you had one, everybody in here, you probably got one sitting right beside you, in your lap, in your pocket. But if you had a cell phone in the year 2000, you probably bought it for the reason to make phone calls. You don't do that anymore. We don't buy cell phones to make phone calls. We buy them to text, to post on social media, to surf the internet, or however you want to say it. I mean, there are people who will upgrade to the latest, greatest $1,200, $1,600 phone simply because it claims to have a better camera. A lot's changed. Speaking of texting, I always, when this comes to mind, need to pause and make sure you're aware that I helped invent texting. I don't know if you know that or not. If you've been here at New Life for a while, you've heard me tell this story before, but for you newcomers, you need to know just what a genius I am and how really famous, just not recognized, I am. I invented texting. So back before cell phones were a big deal, I had the latest and greatest of technology, a pager. Okay? The really cool kids called them beepers. I had one of those, had a beeper. And Jessica and I were dating. I was in Bible college. And she would call my beeper and put in a numerical message, which I would then have to decode based upon the corresponding letters on a touch-tone phone. to see what it was she was trying to say to me. That was the beginning of texting. So maybe I didn't actually come up with it, but my generation, we invented this thing called texting. You know, it was absolutely amazing. Back in the year 2000, I remember just getting on the internet. That's a pretty big deal. You remember dial-up was, man, that was lightning fast, wasn't it? You know, if you had dial-up, that was ding, 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 ding. You know, now you have to at least be my age or older to even know that what I was referring to. I didn't just like momentarily check out. For those of you who are younger, think, man, pastor just like glitch in the matrix and he just freaked out. Right? No, that was the noise that it made as you waited for whatever page it was to appear on your screen. You're logging on to the internet. Back in 2000, you know, your home phones, that was still a thing. I don't think I've had a home phone in, 20 years. But back then, everybody had a home phone. But even like, caller ID, things like that, they were just starting to make their way onto the market. You know, back then, if you were trying to avoid somebody, you just had to answer your phone sort of cautiously. You couldn't just up and ghost somebody because you could see their name. Oh, man, I don't want to talk to them. No, you had to answer the phone hoping that it might not be them. But anyway, a lot's changed. Even in the church world, a lot has changed. In our church, not just in the last 20, 25 years, but since I've been here, and I became the pastor here at New Life in 2007. The church was founded, believe it or not, as a house church way back in like 96. Met in a few houses. Later on, went to some storefronts here in Locust. Finally came to this particular piece of property and built the auditorium that you're sitting in right now in 2000. I think it was completed in 2005. And then the founding pastor and pastors, families that helped start the church went on their way, went into other ventures, and I came in March of 2007. And back then, just from an attendance perspective, we averaged around 50 to 75 people on a Sunday morning. We might bump close to 100 every now and then. But I remember in that first year, maybe even into the first couple years, there were plenty of non-holiday weekends and non-snow day weekends where we had less than 50 people. Melanie, remember, she's the only one left here since then. Right, she's the OG, New Life OG right there. But she remembers. It was a small crowd. Well, now, here we are, running 2 identical services, including our kids over in Kids Life every Sunday, running over 500 on a weekend. That first Easter that we had here after I became the pastor, it was our goal to have 130 people. Easter attendance goal, 130 or 150 people. We got 130. You might think, well, were you disappointed that you didn't meet your goal? You missed it by 20 people? Absolutely not. 130 people in this room that year, it might as well have been 1,030. It was incredible, so exciting. In comparison, just this past Easter, this year, there were over 900 people here. Y'all remember that? I hope your memory's not that short. It was packed. It was crazy up in here. Both services, packed to the walls. Not a seat to be had. People sitting out in the foyer, down the main connector hallway. Absolutely amazing. A lot has changed. I think about back then from a financial perspective. In 2007, our annual church budget was around $100,000. We give away at least $100,000 now to missions and evangelism. Now, just so you know, since the very beginning, it's been our commitment to redistribute in missions and evangelism no less than 10% of what our church brings in in annual giving. So that means in that first year, if our annual giving was $100,000, we did in missions and evangelism $10,000. Well, what do we have to bring in if we're giving away $100,000? God has done some incredible things here. But as we say all the time, the best is yet to come. This is only the beginning. And so with that said, as we start this new series today, Ekklesia, I want to start it by having just a true heart-to-heart conversation with you. Pastor to people here. This series is all about the church, not just this church, but we will include the idea of the universal church, the worldwide church. Because see, that's what the word ekklesia means. In your New Testament, the original language was Greek. The Greek word ekklesia, literally translated, means the gathering, or the assembly, the congregation. It's most often translated in an English Bible as the church. And so throughout this series, we're going to talk about the church. Where did the church begin? How did it evolve? And where's the church going? And we'll notice that since its inception, a lot of things about the church has changed. But I'm going to present to you this morning that even as our world has changed and the church world itself has changed, there are some things about the church that should never change. These things should always remain the same. And to see what those are, you have to go in your Bible to where the church began. And now, if we were just to randomly ask somebody, show me or take me to the place in your Bible where the church began. Just get close. Most people might direct us to the book of Acts. And that's where we see, the beginning of the New Testament church, this fledgling of Christianity and what God did with it. But I would offer to you this morning, to find the true beginning, where the church started, you have to go back a little further, a little earlier than the book of Acts. Indeed, you need to go to the ministry of Jesus, and specifically, you need to find your way to Matthew chapter 16. And that's where we will find not just the beginning of the church, but the church Jesus started. And listen, if we're going to be any kind of church, don't you want to be the kind of church that Jesus started? We don't want to deviate from that. We don't want to not be the kind of church that Jesus started. That's exactly what our goal should be, the kind of church He started. And what we're going to see today is that there were 4 things that were true about the church Jesus started. And if we're going to be that kind of church, they need to be true about us. We need to commit ourselves to these 4 things, and these 4 things must never change. So number 1, if we, New Life Church, are going to be the kind of church that Jesus started, the first thing that must be true about us is we must never play it safe. Matthew chapter 16, beginning in verse 13 and following, is where we find Jesus having this conversation with His disciples in a place called Caesarea Philippi. And it says in verse 13 there, in the region of Caesarea Philippi. It's here where Jesus has this really familiar conversation. It's well known with His disciples about who people say He is. And He asked them that question. Who do people say I am? Well, they give several answers, all of which are incorrect. They weren't their answers. They're just saying, hey, this is what people are saying. But then Peter, he pipes up and he gives the correct answer. And he declares Jesus, and this is the first time you'll see this in the New Testament, he declares Jesus to be the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And to Peter's confession, Jesus responds this way. starting in verse 17. Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. Some translations might have the name John there. For this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, sometimes translated hell, will not overcome it. Now I want to stop there for a moment, because the where this is taking place is really important. Sometimes when we read our Bibles, we tend to quickly gloss over the names of places and people because we want to get to the good stuff. You know? We want to know, what's this passage all about? What's trying to be said here? And we just sort of skate right over locations, names. But here, this is important. Verse 13 there tells us that this conversation, again, took place in the region of Caesarea Philippi. And understanding this particular location is key to understanding the kind of church Jesus started. Now, Caesarea Philippi was located about 25 miles north of Galilee. Galilee is where, that region around the Sea of Galilee, is where Jesus spent the bulk of his time. Most of his ministry, miracles performed, and teaching all took place in this one particular region. And all indications suggest that Caesarea Philippi was as far north that Jesus ever traveled. Why even go there? It's a very peculiar place. It would have been considered, so to speak, the red light district for Jews. You just didn't go to Caesarea Philippi. It was not a safe place to go. They avoided it because in the Jewish mind, it was the epicenter for pagan worship. The area, the region of Caesarea Philippi, corresponds in your Old Testament to the region of Bashan or Bashan. There is where there is a mountain that is very well known in the Old Testament, spoken of many different times, called Mount Hermon. Caesarea Philippi was located at the base of this mountain. And it was like a sheer cliff, like a rock sheer. And even Mount Hermon at times was referred to as the rock. Starting to make sense now. Jesus says, upon this rock I will build my church. See, a lot of people say the rock he was referring to was himself. Well, maybe in a prophetic way or spiritual kind of way, but in a very literal way, he was saying right here in this peculiar place is where I will build my church. And the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Why that kind of language? Well, because there in the side of that rock cliff face was a cave. And it was believed by the people there in that region that deep in this cave is where the spirits and gods of the underworld resided. The mouth of this cave is where they would enter and exit the worldly, this terrestrial world. You know what they called that entrance? The gates of hell. The gateway to the underworld. And so people would gather here to perform pagan worship. Particularly one god was Pan, the goat god. You might see pictures like this if you would go look it up online. A figure that sort of has like the head of a goat, the torso of a man, and then like stands on like two goat-looking legs. Really creepy. We would say probably demonic-looking kind of a figure. But the temple to Pan was built into the side of that cliff. Literally, where it was referred to be the gates of Hades or Hades. And so people would go there, they would worship, they would commit all kinds of lewd acts in a way to entice the gods and these spirits into the terrestrial realm, our realm. So you can imagine the kind of place this was. Not one of your stops on your summer family vacation. Not a place that many of us would even dare to go. But think about it. It was there, Caesarea Philippi, that Jesus started the church. To start his church, Jesus didn't go to the safe place. He didn't go to Jerusalem. He didn't go to the God-fearing, the religious people. He didn't go to the nice town or the right side of the tracks. No, Jesus went to one of the most irreligious, ungodliest, dangerous places of his time. He went to the place where people were quite literally knocking on the gates of hell. And he said, right here is where I'm going to start my church. And these gates and all the powers that they represent will never prevail against it. Wow. What's that mean? Well, it means if Jesus was willing to take risks like that, go to unsafe places to start his church, then his church, you and I, this church, we got to be willing to do the same. I'm not saying that we'd be reckless, that we'd be careless, that we put people's lives in danger. What I'm saying is we got to be a kind of church that's willing to take some risk so that the gospel can go where it needs to go to accomplish the purpose that God gave it. And to do that, to make sure that we're that kind of church, I think we need to consistently break 3 rules. I know we probably got a lot of rule followers. Any rule breakers in here? We had a few in the first, I got a few rule breakers in here. So you're going to like this. This is permission to break some rules. Okay. We need to break consistently the rule of perfection. The perfection rule. We should never make it our goal in our wildest imagination to be a church full of perfect people. It's not going to happen. We are all imperfect people, and that means this church will always be an imperfect church. So if this is your first time here today and you're looking for what you might consider the perfect church for you and your family, you probably should keep looking, because this ain't it. I'm not saying it's a bad church. It's a great church. But it's certainly not a perfect church. And we're way far from being full of perfect people. If you happen to find it on your search for the perfect church, if you happen to find it out there somewhere, don't join it. Why? Because then you're going to mess it up. Because you're not perfect either, right? In all seriousness, though, if you find a church that in any way claims to be perfect, hey, we're a church, we got it together. Or they give off the vibe that everybody in our church, man, we've all got it all. We got our lives together. We got it all figured out. Listen, keep going. Beware of that church. Jesus says, I'm going to go to this place, this risky, dangerous, irreligious place, and begin my church. And I'm going to fill it full of imperfect people. And he has certainly done that. Which also means that as we continue to see this take place and the church of Jesus grow, being filled with imperfect people, let's not get mad when people don't act perfectly. That's sort of a given. You fill a place full of imperfect people, then you're going to get imperfect behavior. Okay, so let's just give each other a little bit of grace. I'm not saying we don't hold each other accountable, but let's just understand we're all imperfect people. Number 2, we need to always break the predictable rule. The predictable rule. No one would have thought, even imagined, that Jesus or any other religious figure would go to a place like Caesarea Philippi to start a movement. But that's exactly where he went. He was not predictable. And to be the kind of church that Jesus started We can't be predictable. We can't fall into routines and patterns just for the sake of those things. We always got to be open to trying something different, doing something new. We should kill the phrase, "We've never done it like that." Let's not utter those words ever in our church. Let's always be willing to do it in some way that we've never done before. Let's be willing to try things, to think of new ways to get the gospel of Jesus in front of a lost world. What that means is we may end up trying things that, and this is no jab at other churches, but we may try some things that the other churches will never try, never think of trying, or ever desire to try. Not because we're cooler, or because we just want to be edgy, or because we're so creative, but simply because we're willing to do whatever it takes to take the kingdom of God and the gospel of Christ as far as we can take it. That also means if we're going to break the predictable rule, we're not going to be a church that tries to control people and police lives and shove everybody into a mold. I don't know if you've ever been a part of a church like that. I grew up in a church sort of like that. You could go in every Sunday and it was somewhat predictable. Everybody's going to look sort of the same. They're going to dress the same. Haircuts are going to be very similar. They're all going to talk and act in much the same way. They're going to listen to the same music. Somewhat programmed. Well, I didn't really flourish there. I thank God for it. That was where I got saved. That's where I was called to preach. But it was not a place where I could spiritually develop. It's not a place that really pushed me to take the gospel as far as we could take it. So it's my commitment that New Life's not going to be the kind of church that tries to tell you, how your hairstyle should be, what kind of clothes you ought to wear. I mean, just wear some, please. That's always a good thing. But we're not going to tell you what kind of music you should listen to or shouldn't listen to. Because Paul said in Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, it is for freedom that Christ set us free. Stand firm then, and don't let yourselves be bound to a yoke of slavery. That's interesting. If we become a church that tries to control and police everybody's lives, sounds like Paul is saying we are enacting a form of slavery. We're the master, and you're the servant. We believe in Christian freedom here. Now, does that mean that we believe that everybody should just be able to do whatever they want, live any way they want to live? Well, certainly not. I mean, that's ridiculous. Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commandments. In other words, you'll live in a way that honors me. There's a Christian standard to be upheld. But we're not going to be the ones who are in everybody's lives. That's a rule that we're going to consistently break. Number 3, we're going to break the passive rule. The passive rule. That's sort of the idea, well, somebody else will do it. Somebody else will go there and do that. I mean, think about it this way. If you were to leave home after service today, or to leave church and go home, to discover your neighbor's house on fire, like, how might you react to that? What might you do? Just, pray for them? Lord, I can see my neighbor's house over there on fire. God, have mercy. If there's anyone in there, Lord, in your divine providence, would you somehow, some way, if it be your will, Lord, save them? Would you go down the street to find another neighbor? Hey, would you mind going over there and telling the Smiths their house is on fire? Would you go online sometime this afternoon or tomorrow when you get to work? Well, maybe you got tomorrow off. I hope you do. To discover, try to find, are there courses out there that could train me on how to tell my neighbor their house is on fire? No, you wouldn't do any of that because that's stupid. right? First, you would call 911, right? You would get some emergency services on the way. And then I would hope, if there was any thought in your mind that there might be someone in that house, your neighbor, that you could possibly save, you would kick the door down, bust the window out, do whatever it takes to try to save their life. I believe the room's full of people who would be willing to do that, put themselves at risk to save somebody else. Well, here at New Life Church, we're not in the house saving business, but we're in the people soul saving business. And we need to wake up and realize that without Christ, our family members, our friends, our co-workers, those we go to school with, our teammates, will end up eternally separated from God in a place called hell if we don't tell them about Christ. If we don't present to them the gospel of Jesus. So let's stop making up excuses for not doing it. We need very little training on how to tell others about Jesus and how to share His love with them. We need to realize that eternity hangs in the balance. So what I'm telling you is invite like you've never invited before. Give like you've never given before. Serve like you've never served before. Let's get very specific. Let me give you an assignment this morning. If you believe that what I'm telling you is true, that this is what we need to be doing, this is the kind of church that we need to be, it's September the 1st. You got 30 days. Do this, 30 days to bring, not just invite, but to bring someone you know to church. Someone who doesn't know Christ, who's unchurched, or someone who is, let's just say, de-churched. They might claim to have a relationship with Jesus. Perhaps they made a profession of faith sometime in their past. They used to attend church somewhere, sometime long ago, but they haven't been in years. Bring them. Go get them. Charge the gates of hell and drag them out. We can do this. Let's not make it a goal to get that person to church by the end of this year or by this time next year. Let's get them here by the end of this month so that we can share the gospel of Jesus. Break the passive rule. Stop waiting on somebody else to do it. The second commitment that we need to make and we need to hold firmly to in order to be the kind of church that Jesus started is we must always be a one-man show. Never play it safe and always be a one-man show. I don't know if you've ever done this or not, but sometimes I'll jump in the car. I'll get, 5 or 10 minutes down the road and totally forget where in the world I was going. Maybe your memory's not quite as bad as mine, but mine's pretty bad sometimes. Or back when I used to go to Walmart, you're probably thinking, what you mean, you used to go to Walmart? I don't go to Walmart anymore. I'm not boycotting Walmart. I have nothing against Walmart. I think Walmart's great. I just don't go. I send Jessica. Jessica goes to Walmart a lot, but I don't go. I figure, well, if I can't order it online and then bring it to me, I probably don't need it. So, and plus, if I go to Walmart to get one thing, it takes me half an hour because there's going to be at least 24 people who stop me and want to talk, 3 of which want to have a counseling session right there, in the produce aisle. I don't have time to go to Walmart, right? And plus, when I walk in, I've forgotten what I was there to get anyway, so I have to do a couple laps. Get some triggers. Oh, yeah, that's what I came for. I have a tendency to forget things like that. Sometimes I'll just hop in the truck, getting ready to go somewhere. I'm like, ooh, forgot to get my phone. And for the next 10 minutes, I'll run around the house, inside and out, looking for my phone, retracing my steps, thinking, where was the last place I put it? All to realize that I'm doing all that while holding it. You idiot, Maybe somebody can relate. We have a tendency to forget things. Now listen to this. In 2019, Lifeway Research produced a study that reported 4,500 Protestant churches. Now that's a label that would include Baptist, Lutheran, Presbyterians, non-denominational, all those. 4,500 churches closed in 2019. That same year, 3,000 churches opened. Now, it's a difference of 1,500, right? That gap of 1,500 churches represents a void that will likely never be filled. Why? Because there is a recent trend of churches closing, declining, or at best, plateauing. Why is that? Why are there more churches closing or in decline than there are opening and growing? Because we forget things. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons, but the primary one is we forget that the church is a one-man show. The church becomes about something else or someone else, but not about Jesus. It's got to come back to Him. The church always has to be a one-man show who has a one message, a unifying message, the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's not about the pastor. It's not about the chairman of the deacons. It's not about the worship leader or the youth pastor. It's not about being contemporary or traditional. It's not about politics, whether you're conservative or liberal or Democrat or Republican. It's not about going green or any other color. The church is about one man, Jesus Christ, and His gospel. And I'm committed to lead this church with it being about one man. I think we got a great reputation in our community, and we've worked hard for it over the years. I run into very few people in our community who have negative things to say about our church, but there are a few. And you might run into them from time to time, and some of them might even say, yeah, that New Life Church down there, they're a one-man show. Taking a shot at me, at your church. Here's what I would ask you to do. If you ever hear anybody say that, your church is a one-man show, you tell them you got that right. We absolutely are a one-man show, and His name's Jesus. Everything we do here revolves around Jesus and seeks to bring Him glory. Now, years ago, I stood in front of our student ministry on a Sunday evening following a very difficult decision. I had to change leadership direction in the student ministry. That's a very nice way of saying terminated the youth leader. But it was necessary at the time. We needed to go and move in a different direction, and that was the only way. Well, of course, students who get attached to their leadership were upset. They had questions, and so I wanted to address those, and I wanted to encourage them and reassure them that all was well and would be okay. And so I called out all the students and their volunteers, and I stood here on this stage and spoke to them what I felt was a very honest and encouraging message. But later on, I received back word that one of the students went home and posted on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook, but it all gets back to me usually eventually. But this student posted on Facebook, quote, I went there to that Sunday night gathering. I went there to get answers to my questions, but all the pastor talked about was Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Well, even though I know this kid meant that to be an attack, and it pained me that he didn't understand, that he was upset, I thought, at the end of the day, I'm okay with that. Even though that was meant to be an attack, I'm going to take that as the greatest compliment ever. Because we are indeed all about Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Everything we do. But it doesn't stop there. We don't want to play it safe. We don't want to be passive. But to be the kind of church that Jesus started, number 3, we got to beg God to change lives. Not just once, but to keep doing it over and over and over. Maybe you've heard the phrase a one-hit wonder. It usually refers like a musician, some kind of songwriter. They produce this song, and it soars to number 1 really quickly. And everybody, back when you used to like buy CDs and stuff, everybody wants to buy that single. Now everybody's downloading that one song. But then, after the news sort of wears off a bit, you never hear anything much from that artist anymore. They never really produce any other music that even close rivals that one song. They sort of drift off into obscurity and eventually acquire the label one-hit wonder. For example, if I were to play for you this morning a song that started out like this, and y'all are thinking, ice, ice, baby. All right, you'd be right. Now, those of you who are older are thinking, under pressure. All right, you just told on yourself right there. You just showed your age, but it's okay. But, those one-hit wonders, man, they bring back a lot of memories. Takes me back to like my 7th, 8th grade year, waiting for hours in my bedroom with 2 fingers on play record, waiting for that song to come on the radio. I can hit it real quick and record it, okay? Brings back a lot of memories. But, man, if our church ever becomes a one-hit wonder church, it's going to bring a lot of pain. I would caution us from being a church that celebrates a few great years and then puts it on cruise control and coasts for the next 25. What a shame. What a shame. What a loss. Listen, we've seen God do some incredible things here. We've seen lives radically changed. But it's just started. In a few short years, God has done some exceptional things. But I believe those things are just the beginning. And you see, if we will commit this morning to continue to beg God to change lives, we'll never be a one-hit wonder church. Because Jesus will keep doing it over and over and over again just so long as we stay addicted to seeing Him do it. Because that's His promise. He said there in verse 18, on this rock, in this place, I will build my church. And there is nothing that all the powers of hell will be able to do about it. But we, the church, must stay fixated on seeing Him do it. Listen, He started the movement right then with Peter. Peter gives this confession. You're the Christ. You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus says, you're right, Peter. And I'm going to start with your confession and many like it that will follow it. And I'll build the greatest organism the world has ever seen. And the powers of hell will not be able to stop it. I'm starting with you, Peter. And Peter went on to preach to thousands in the book of Acts, to see 3,000 people come to Christ on one occasion. Wow. He is the foundation on which the church is built. But the walls are constructed to change lives. And the church is always under construction. Let's beg God to change lives. Finally, if we're going to be the church Jesus started, we got to finish strong. We got to finish strong. Most of you know starting anything's easy. That's the easy part. Just getting started. Finishing is where we run into some problems. Follow through. That's what usually gets us. We're reminded of this every single year. The beginning of a new year. Oh, I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to lose 20 pounds. Or I'm going to start this exercise regimen. I'm going to read through the entire Bible this year. Or I'm going to stop this bad habit. And then February comes. And we have long since given up. Back to the same old same. We often fizzle out long before we finish. We can't be that kind of people. We can't be that kind of church if we're going to be the kind of church Jesus started. Where does it start? Where does that example start? I know where it starts. Right here with me. If we're going to be the church that finishes strong, that doesn't fizzle out, the weight's on my shoulders to lead the way, to lead that charge. Let me share with you, just to put it in perspective, how difficult that can be. Because I want to give you a personal commitment this morning as your pastor. Within the realm of my control and ability to do so, I am committed to finishing strong, to continuing the work for as long as I can, and as long as I can remain effective. And I'm not talking about exercise. I'm not talking about things like that. I'm talking about life, about ministry. But there are many pastors and church leaders out there who fizzle out long before they finish strong. It's said in studies that have been compiled over the years that the number could be as high as 90%. It's pretty high. 90% of pastors and church leaders who enter the ministry will not finish. That means they won't retire in the ministry. One recent survey pointed out that every month, think about this, every month, 1,500 pastors leave the ministry because of burnout, moral failure, and church contention, just fighting within the church. 50% of pastors are said to be so discouraged that they would quit the ministry except for they don't know how they would make any other means of living. How are they going to pay the bills? That's all they know. It's said that 80% of Bible college students, seminary students, won't be in the ministry after 5 years. 70% of pastors constantly battle depression. And 80% of their spouses say they wish that they would choose another career path. It's just a little pressure leading the church, which is the biggest motivator for taking time off, a sabbatical just like I just did. It's why I can stand here this morning and say to you, I am so grateful. I am so grateful to be a part of a church like this, who loves their pastor and the staff so much, to say, you know, every 7 years, and that's what we do, every 7 years you need a break. Not like just a few days or a week at the beach. Like you seriously need an extended break to rest, to refuel, to re-energize yourself and your family life. And we support you in that. We want to encourage that. Listen, you may not have directly had input in that particular decision, but every single one of you have been supportive of it. I've ran into you out in public, or you've sent me a text or called me and said, Pastor, you know, we love you. We can't wait till you get back. But you rest. You take this time. Man, thank you. It's been incredible. Listen, it's as hard for me to stay away from you as maybe it is for you to stay away from me, because we love each other, don't we? I love you guys. And I went, there was 2 weeks we were out of town, The other 2 weeks, I went to a church down South Charlotte that I'm beginning a relationship with, their pastor, and we got some plans of some things coming up next year together, and I think they're doing a great work. And so we went down there to worship with them, and it's a great church, man. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't here. It wasn't home. And I can't tell you how excited I was to get up this morning and know that I was going to be able to stand here and look at you guys and share with you what God has put on my heart. Man, I love this place. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to rest. Because those who don't end up fizzling out. You know, maybe you went to a church that it seemed like every 3 to 5 years there was like this revolving door of pastors. You know, this guy comes in, he stays a little while, and then he's out, and then another one comes in, and he's out, and it's just round and round and round you go. You know, sometimes that's a pastor's fault. He's looking out for the next best opportunity, the next big church, or, you know, the next church is going to pay him a little more than this one. But here's reality, too. This might not be something that anybody's ever shared with you before because they're too scared. I ain't scared, though. Sometimes that happens because churches kill pastors. They run them to death. They put too much responsibility on them. They put requirements and expectations on the shoulder of their pastor and their church leaders that nobody can withstand. They wouldn't take it upon themselves or put it on anybody else, but they lay it on the shoulders of their pastor, and they just can't do it. One man can't do it. Or there's so much bickering in the church, just constant infighting, complaining. It just kills them. So that's why a lot of pastors, they fizzle out before they finish strong. Let's not do that. I'm committed to trying to avoid that, to safeguard against that, to be a leader that you can follow. But in that, I'm asking you to do your part, and that is follow. Let's finish strong. Let's do the work that we've set out to do. Let's grab hold of the responsibility that God's given us, and not just talk about doing it, not just think about how great it would be, but to actually get out there and do the work. Again, I think New Life's best days are still ahead. What God's done in the past is just a foundation for the fruit that will be produced in the future. Because this is His church. And the gates of hell will not prevail against it. But what about you? What about in your personal life? What about in your own walk with Christ? You been playing it safe? You've been doing just enough to make yourself feel like, yeah, I'm getting by. I'm good, you know. What about that person that came to mind when I said, you know, invite somebody. By the end of the month, get them here. I'm sure just about everybody here, somebody's face came to mind. Somebody's name popped into your thoughts. I'm not asking you just to go invite them. I'm saying today, hit your knees and beg God to change that person's life. Plead with God to draw them to Himself, because their eternity hangs in the balance. Kick the gates down and drag them out. That's our job. Was there a time in your life where you were really excited about Christ, excited about serving, excited about your walk with the Lord? But over the last year, 2, 3 years, 6 months, you've let up? I know it happens to me. Let's recognize that quickly, and correct course. Pedal to the metal. never let up. Let's finish the work. With every head bowed and every eye closed, God, we thank you so much for your word today. And Lord, the challenge, but also the encouragement that we received from it. I pray that everybody in here has sensed the urgency of this moment, of the task at hand, but has also felt and tapped into the passion in doing the work that you've given us to do. Lord, we sit here knowing what it is we're supposed to do, what we're supposed to be about. We know that person that we need to go to tomorrow, this week, and begin inviting them, doing our part to draw them into fellowship with you. God, I pray that we would leave here today with a sense of determination to go and do that thing that you have put in our heart to accomplish. As Paul said in his letter to the Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 8, Lord, let our eagerness to do a certain thing be matched by the completion of it. And when it's completed, Lord Jesus, may you receive all the glory, the honor, and praise for it all. It's in your name we pray.